This is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3. Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for the good programming. I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Holy hell. If you haven't been paying attention to what's been going on today, and my voice is the first voice you're hearing, I am so sorry for what I am about to tell you. I've been saying all along that with Donald Trump in the White House, we see all this bad stuff coming, but I've been saying it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I didn't think even Donald Trump would humiliate and embarrass us the way he and his lapdog J.D. Vance did today. And also, have you noticed Trump can't handle anybody alone? Macron corrects him. The Prime Minister of the UK corrects him. So now all of a sudden when he's going to be sitting with Zelensky, J.D. Vance is there for backup. J.D. Vance is there because when Donald Trump can't follow along with the conversation, J.D. Vance was basically the attack dog today. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was seemingly set up by the two highest elected government officials in our country. They went after him. J.D. Vance doing this, feeding red meat to the base. You should be saying thank you. Nobody helps you. Where do you say thank you? You're not saying thank you. Do you know how many times Ukrainian President Zelensky has thanked the people of the United States? Virtually every time he has made any kind of public address, he has thanked us. But because of the low information voters who aren't paying attention to any of that, they're going to look at J.D. Vance going, well, by gosh, he's right. That's Zelensky. He should be thanking us. They tag teamed him. They insulted him. They interrupted him. They talked over him. They raised their voices to him. And the one time Zelensky called it out, he's like, look, you don't have to use a loud voice when you talk to me, he said to Vance. And Donald Trump jumped in and goes, he's not shouting. He's not being loud. Yeah, actually, Donald, he was. He absolutely was. It was so embarrassing to be an American today. It was so embarrassing. It was shameful. Well, let me tell you the other side. How did Russia like it? Well, they have a former president, Dmitry Medvedev. And you know what he said? He said it was time that insolent pig got a proper slap down in the Oval Office. That's Volodymyr Zelensky, the insolent pig. So Russia is like all in on this. And Donald Trump repeatedly reminded him that, Zelensky, you have no cards to play. Without the United States, you have no cards to play. It was breathtaking. We talk sometimes about how one of our complaints about Democrats is that they always seem kind of passionless. Well, here's the dark side of being passionate. You get somebody who is being egged on by J.D. Vance. I mean, literally, the two of them, it was like there was no effort to have a discussion. And you know how Donald Trump is now letting in the conservative media to his press conferences? There's a conservative reporter. Actually, he's Marjorie Taylor Greene's a boyfriend. Yeah. And you know how Zelensky always wears, either a gray T-shirt or now he's switched to wearing a long sleeve black shirt that has the Ukrainian emblem on it. And he does that because he wants to remind people anywhere he goes and everywhere he speaks that he represents a country at war. That's why he's not going to show up like in a military outfit or a suit and tie. He wears clothing reflective of the kind of clothing that his warriors are wearing. And Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend said, "How come you're not wearing a suit? Don't you think that this office deserves that respect?" Oh, that was another big theme. Zelensky isn't giving us the respect we deserve. You need us. You have no cards to play without us. You don't respect us. You should be groveling. You should be thanking us. Zelensky didn't even get too many sentences out without being interrupted. This is certainly one of the lowest days that I've experienced as a citizen of this country, and certainly the most boorish behavior that has ever been seen at the White House. Ever been seen at the White House. The whole theme of the takedown was, you don't appreciate us enough. You haven't groveled enough. You haven't kowtowed enough. You haven't thanked us enough. You owe us so much. That was pretty much the theme. World reaction has been swift, and except for what you're hearing out of Russia, everybody has fallen into line in supporting Zelensky and acknowledging the battle and not acknowledging Russian aggression. One former NATO chief, I believe a retired admiral, was interviewed on CNN, and he said this bridge of trust, this bridge we have constructed between ourselves and Western Europe, he said, I'm not going to say the bridge broke today, but the bridge is definitely creaking. So there was this heated exchange. They called an end to the news conference. Apparently, the Ukrainians went to one room, Vance and Trump went to another room, and then Trump told his aides that they needed to get in touch with Marco Rubio because Marco Rubio needed to tell the Ukrainians they needed to leave. Because even after that angry humiliation that they put Zelensky through, the Ukrainian delegation said, we want to continue talking. Let's keep on talking. And Trump basically kicked them out of the White House. And Volodymyr, unless something happens right away, Volodymyr Zelensky is going to be leaving the United States. He was supposed to make a speech tonight. That's not happening. Oh, and by the way, those minerals that Trump had his eye on, yeah, that deal didn't get signed. When the guy who's supposed to sign the deal, when you kick him out, it makes somebody less likely to want to sign a deal like that. So I don't know where we go from here. It is utterly humiliating. If you heard the exchange at the White House, because I'm going to play a really long clip from it. You know, if I understand, if you heard it and can't stand to hear it again, I'm going to tell you right now, turn the sound down, set a timer for 6-7 minutes, and then turn the sound back up. Because it's ugly. It is ugly. So there you go. You've had your trigger warning. This is not even everything, but this is the bulk of some of the worst of it. Between the Ukrainian president and apparently our president, who cannot apparently attend to any kind of important thing without a handler. Usually it's Musk. Today it was Vance. Oh, okay. Well, let's assume that those of us who've heard it before and don't want to hear it again have turned down the radio. So for the rest of us, fasten your seatbelt, kids, and listen to this.
the deal. I signed with him, Macron and Merkel, we signed ceasefire. Ceasefire. All of them told me that he will never go. We signed him with gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broken this ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Count one.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
Feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's backed you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war,
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet.
You haven't been alone.
In this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and you men are brave, but they had to use our military.
What about
if you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe less.
In 2 weeks. Of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said a lot of times. Except that there are disagreements,
and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on. I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards.
Thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. You're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I wanted this. Look. If you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
With guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me. That wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person. That was with Obama.
It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question from Mr. Vice President. I'm sorry, here.
It'll be a tough deal to make, because the attitudes have to change.
What if Russia breaks ceasefire? What if Russia breaks peace talks? What do you do then? I understand that it's a heated conversation right now.
What are you saying?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden, because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting. And then they said, oh, the laptop from hell was made by Russia. The 51 agents. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with that. He was being accused of all that stuff. All I can say is this. He might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, and he might have broken them with Biden. He did, maybe. Maybe he didn't. I don't know what happened. But he didn't break them with me.
There you go. There's 7 minutes of unprofessional ugliness. You see what I'm saying? That where even J.D. Vance asks Zelensky 3 questions. He doesn't even get halfway through an answer to the first question before they start jumping in and yelling at him. Here has been some of the reaction from European leaders. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa posted this, both of them. Your dignity honors the bravery of the Ukrainian people. Be strong, be brave, be fearless. You are never alone, dear President Zelensky. We will continue working with you for a just and lasting peace. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Nobody wants peace more than the citizens of Ukraine. That is why we are working together to find a way to a lasting and just peace. Ukraine can rely on Germany and on Europe. Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof. The Netherlands continues to support Ukraine, especially now. We want lasting peace and an end to the war of aggression that Russia has started for Ukraine, for all of its inhabitants, and for Europe. Luxembourgish Prime Minister Luc Frieden. Luxembourg stands with Ukraine. You are fighting for your freedom and a rules-based international order. Portuguese President Luis Montenegro. Ukraine can always count on Portugal. President Zelensky. Czech Prime Minister Peter Fiala. We stand with Ukraine and on the side of the free world. Latvian Prime Minister Evika Seliņa said simply, Latvia stands with Ukraine. Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre. We stand by Ukraine in their fair struggle for a just and lasting peace. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson. Sweden stands with Ukraine. You are not only fighting for your freedom, but also for all of Europe's. Slava Ukraini. The Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda. Ukraine, you'll never walk alone. Irish Foreign Minister Simon Harris. Ukraine is not to blame for this war brought about by Russia's illegal invasion. We stand with Ukraine. Poland has made a statement. Spain has made a statement. France has made a statement. The rest of the world is standing with Volodymyr Zelensky. Poland's prime minister put out, "Dear Zelensky, dear Ukrainian friends, you are not alone." Well, they're certainly not getting any support here after that exchange, that ridiculous, angry, unprofessional exchange from our ridiculous, unprofessional, undiplomatic president and his Nazi vice president in waiting. Like I said, they called an end to the news conference. Ukrainians were ushered into one room. J.D. Vance and Trump went to another room. Trump apparently called one of his aides and said, "Call Marco Rubio and tell the Ukrainians to leave." And apparently that happened. And Volodymyr Zelensky was supposed to make a speech tonight that has been canceled. He got into his SUV despite the fact that the Ukrainians sent out a message, "We'd like to keep talking. Let's keep talking." They were told, "No, you're leaving." They were kicked out of the White House. He got back in his SUV. I don't know where he is now, but chances are very shortly he will be leaving the country. It is almost beyond belief. Almost beyond belief what happened today. U.S. world leaders, former heads of important organizations that have to deal with international relations and NATO are all weighing in that this is truly putting not just our relationship with Ukraine, but our relationship with the other democracies of the world, with Western Europe, with the United Kingdom, with Canada, with the other democracies of the world. This has put our relationship with them on the line. This isn't just a question of can they or can't they trust us. After today, they know they can't trust us. Everybody was stunned when the United States voted with Russia, when there was a move to an non-binding resolution saying, you know what, Russia needs to get out of Ukraine. We voted against it. We've now aligned ourselves with North Korea, Iran, Russia. The people that we used to consider our adversaries are now our allies, apparently. And what does this mean for NATO? Donald Trump has always had a stick up his butt about NATO. But Donald Trump has never really understood why NATO came to be or what it does. So I guess that Donald Trump has to be seen in two lights. Anything that makes him feel like he's loved and got attention, anything that aggrandizes him is good, and anything that puts money in his pocket is good. That's it. Doesn't care about country, doesn't care about anybody. I believe he doesn't even care about his family. And I guess Ukraine didn't suck up quite as much as they should have today. We're going to take a break. The phone lines are going to be open. I've got some sound of some of the United States reaction. J.B. Pritzker has reacted. Mike Quigley has reacted. We have other reactions. I'm going to get to that right after a break.
If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, or HeartlandSignal.com. Just search for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive. You know that you can listen to Chicago's Progressive Talk on WCPT AM 820. Stream us live at WCPT820.com and on the TuneIn Radio app. Or you can ask Alexa, Siri, or Google to play WCPT from TuneIn. But now you have another option. We're simulcasting our programming overnights, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. on WSBC AM 1240 for a clearer reception in and around the city. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. And now overnights on WSBC 1240 AM, where facts matter.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Don't turn that dial. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now.
A fair balance where the facts come out.
On WCPT 820.
We are opening the phone lines, and I am going to get to the phone lines in a couple of minutes, but I want to share with you some of what is being said, the reaction to what took place this afternoon, where basically Donald Trump and J.D. Vance tag-teamed Volodymyr Zelensky in a shouting match. Well, Zelensky didn't really do any shouting, but they shouted at him, basically telling him that he should be sucking up to Trump because Trump is the one that's done things for him, and he should agree to a ceasefire, and he should understand that the United States has all the cards, and they wouldn't be anywhere without the United States. And has he said thank you enough? I don't think so. He needs to say thank you more. It was jaw-dropping. Mike Quigley said that what happened in the Oval Office today, and I quote, was embarrassing beyond comprehension. Listen to Congressman Mike Quigley.
This is the Trump-Vance clown show, and it's horrifying. We are fundamentally a different country than what we were just weeks ago, to our friends and foes alike, and we are fundamentally less safe. I have to say, the thing that struck me first and foremost was saying that they were ungrateful. I met with Ukrainian military officials yesterday. I met members of the Rada and their military. I've met President Zelensky 7 times since the war started. Every meeting with them here and in Ukraine began with their extraordinary gratitude of what the United States has done to help. And they continue to do that. And when I compare the president talking about Zelensky not being legitimate, when in his first term he refused to even question Putin versus our own intel community, to ever say anything but nice things about Putin, a tyrant who kills his own people, who invaded. I stood on the mass grave at Bucha. For him to not question Putin, a man who came from KGB's legitimacy, he's more like Putin. Zelensky, who has gone through great risk for his life, at a time unlike the Blitz, he reminds me of Churchill. So this is embarrassing beyond comprehension. I hope my other Republican colleagues will stand with us to do the right thing.
Well, according to social media, Lindsey Graham has decided not to stand with Ukraine. He posted something about the fact that he was really proud of Trump today. But then Lindsey Graham is a windsock of a human being. So take that with a grain of salt. Tomorrow he could say the exact opposite. Ben Rhodes is a former Deputy National Security Advisor. Worked at the top levels of government. Now he is sometimes on MSNBC. He was interviewed after this debacle. And Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor, said that it pains me as an American. Listen to Ben Rhodes.
Ukraine is a warring party. They don't have to agree to peace. So if what Trump wants is to be able to say that he, ended the war or ended the fighting, the Ukrainians have to stop fighting. And, this is a country that was planning potential guerrilla warfare at the outset of the war if Kyiv had fallen. And so I think for Europe and Ukraine, it's making clear, wait a second, like you've excluded us from the negotiating table. If you actually want to achieve what you say and what you've kept promising people, you actually have to include us. And we've learned where your cards are, to take Donald Trump's analogy. And if your cards are with Russia, then Europe and Ukraine have some cards to play, and because Ukraine is in this war. I'll also say the lesson is you're not going to charm Trump. I mean, we've been through this the first time around. I get why Macron and Starmer came. You'd like to think you can moderate Trump, but you have to show some strength here in terms of what your own position is. I get that some people are going to say Zelensky handled this poorly. I'm not going to sit here in my comfortable house and say that a man who's the president of a country that has seen 20,000 of its children kidnapped and taken to Russia, and seen tens and tens of thousands of people killed, seen war crimes committed in the grossest way in places like Bucha, seen maternity hospitals bombed. Do you think you would have the patience to sit there and be humiliated and see your country humiliated? To say that they're propaganda tours, as J.D. Vance said, when people visit Ukraine and see horrible things, it's not propaganda tours. That's true. That's the reality of what's happening in Ukraine. The propaganda is what's coming out of J.D. Vance's mouth, and it's Russian propaganda. And so I think in that circumstance, you're going to see, whether Ukraine and Europe essentially come to a common position, so that you're essentially in a negotiation between Europe and Ukraine and Russia and the United States. And it really pains me as an American to say that, but that's where we are.
Yeah, and did you catch that exchange when Volodymyr Zelensky said to J.D. Vance, when he was like, oh, yeah, you walk people around, it's all propaganda, it's all propaganda. And Zelensky says, have you been to Ukraine? And J.D. Vance stumbles a little bit, and then he said, well, I've seen the stories. So no, Mr. Zelensky, I haven't been to Ukraine, but I've read about it. So I know you're doing propaganda. Ooh, wasn't expecting that one, were you, JD? Here is what our own Saturday host, Edwin Eisendrath, posted. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance came out as Putin's mob enforcers today. They disgraced our country, and they disgraced the office of the president. The president and vice president used a White House meeting to attack Ukrainian President Zelensky and create a breach between our countries in the midst of war. They lectured him. Then they kicked him out of the White House. Then they launched a campaign to blame Zelensky for the insult. America, at Donald Trump's insistence, has switched sides from defending democracy and the post-World War II order that we built to aiding dictators and military aggressors. You can, if you subscribe to Edwin's Substack, you can read the rest of it. It's disgusted with the U.S. capitalized. Putin's mobsters in Oval Office disgraced our nation today. His Substack is called It's the Democracy, Stupid. He's absolutely right. Donald Trump it's tried to tell Zelensky that Putin will, because Russia was supposed to do a ceasefire once before and they broke it. And there's also been speculation that when Russia has asked for a ceasefire, it's so that they can fortify the front lines. They need a few weeks of not actual fighting to get more people and munitions over there. And it wasn't ever intended to be a real meaningful ceasefire, which is why the people of Ukraine are very leery when somebody says, oh, there should be a ceasefire, because the belief is that they're just giving Putin the time he needs to build up reinforcements. That's what Zelensky meant when he said, let's see. You see what the people of Ukraine say when they're presented with a ceasefire. Oh, Trump didn't want to hear that. Because you know what? Putin may have broken his word to Obama, and he may have broken his word to Biden, but Putin isn't going to break his word to Donald Trump. No, Putin likes and respects Donald Trump. So, anything Donald Trump brings to the table, ooh, that's going to stand. Yeah. Okay. Let me take another break. I have lots of texts. I have lots of phone calls. We are going to jump right in right after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Want to join the conversation?
I'm going to say exactly what I think here.
Got something to say?
Everyone needs to hear what I got to say.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820.
For those of you who are just tuning in, maybe have been running errands, all hell is breaking loose. There was supposed to be a White House press briefing with Trump and Vladimir Zelensky. J.D. Vance apparently felt that he needed to keep an eye on Trump. And the whole thing devolved into a screaming match, not on Zelensky's part, but Trump and J.D. Vance yelling at him about not appreciating the United States, actually not appreciating Donald Trump enough. That's the bottom line. You know, Zelensky, despite the fact that every time he has made a speech to the American public, he says, thank you, thank you, thank you. J.D. Vance was like, well, you know, you really need to say thank you. And Zelensky was like, I have. He goes, no, right here, right now, today. Did you say thank you today? I didn't hear it today. It was an embarrassment. Oh, I'm sure J.D. Vance is very happy because he doesn't care what you think. He doesn't care what you think. If Peter Thiel, his billionaire backer, called him up and said, good job. If he heard from Elon Musk, good job, buddy, and good job keeping the orange guy focused and really taking control. Good job. J.D. Vance doesn't care what you think. As much as Donald Trump is repulsive and repugnant, I think if anything happens to him, we are really going to be in worse trouble because I think J.D. Vance is a wannabe Nazi. I really honestly believe that. You know, he goes to Munich for a security conference, doesn't speak with a single government official officially outside of that briefing, but he speaks with the neo-Nazi party in Germany? I mean, come on. He's not hiding it. Let's go to the phone lines. Naomi is on the line from Santa Monica. Naomi, thank you so much for the call.
Hi, how are you?
I've had better days, Naomi.
Yeah. Well, I want to hide in a hole. I can't even believe what happened. I was surprised that he agreed to meet with him, though. I believe that, of course, he was set up, but I think it was set up by Putin. I think Putin spoke with him, and he had to prove to Putin that he was willing to humiliate Zelensky. I believe it was all a show for Putin. That's what I think.
Whether Putin instructed him to do it or not, the reaction from Russia, publicly it's all been, yeah, you know, you go, Trump, you're saying what needs to be said. But I was listening to a reporter from CNN who is based in Moscow, and he said, you know, publicly everybody's like going like, yay, Trump. He said privately, some of these same leaders are telling me that they were gobsmacked when they saw this exchange. They couldn't believe that it happened. So again, you know, just like with the Republican Party, the public face and the private face often don't align.
Yeah. I'm thinking I'm going to try to contact the embassy and apologize. I can't stand it. It's just too awful.
It is awful. It is.
I'm going to call them. You know, I'm going to call them, and I'm going to try to figure out how to call them, and I'm going to apologize. It's just unbelievable. I
think that's a wonderful idea. My guess is their phone lines are probably jammed with people thinking the same thing. But I think that this is going to come back to bite Trump and J.D. Vance in the butt. I really do, because I think he is, aside from the fact that what he's doing to the government is hurting his own voters, I think that there are many more people in this United States who support Ukraine than who think Ukraine should be thrown to the wolves. And I can't wait for that karma wheel to roll around. But I agree with you.
I hope you're right. Yeah.
It is breathtakingly humiliating to be an American and think that that orange disaster is supposed to represent us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I know.
I'm gonna call them.
Naomi, thank you for the call. It's heartbreaking. It is. I understand wanting to cry. I've always found that when I really want to cry, though, I save myself from that by getting really, really angry. I can be angry for years on end, and I would like to be angry about this and not just be... Because, I mean, what's the alternative? Just complete and utter despair? No, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. Damn them. Damn them to hell. I'm sure we're going to hear more from Governor Pritzker. So far, he's posted President Trump's simple fealty to Vladimir Putin and Russia is embarrassing and dangerous. Illinois stands with Ukraine, and so should the White House. Let's go back to the phone lines, and I'm gonna really work really hard to get to all the callers. I have like 4,000 texts that I'm waiting through as we speak. Let's go to Des Plaines, Illinois. Steve is on the line. Hey, Steve.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. I'm a 71-year-old former Marine, and I've never in my life been disgusted and not proud to be an American in my life. When I was here and I was watching that man who maintained his honor, who maintained his dignity under the thugs, those two freaking thugs who are supposed to be Americans, I wanted to cry. I still want to cry, actually. Yeah. It's just beyond the pale. And then you mentioned the thing with Lindsey Graham, that piece of human excrement. Yeah. And Joan, I'm telling you, this could be the tipping point. This could be the tipping point, maybe. Maybe this is it. He overstepped his bounds, and I think they did it because he got handled. He got taken to school by Macron and the English guy the last couple of days. And they probably went in there with the idea we need to, regain the upper hand.
Well, and I think that's why he had a handler today. Because he faced Macron alone, he faced the UK Prime Minister alone, and didn't do a very good job of it. So today they send in J.D. Vance to hold his hand and fill in the gaps.
Yes. I still want to cry. But anyway, this could be the rallying cry going forward.
God, I hope so.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it. Let's go to Bolingbrook, Illinois. Earl is on the line. Hello, Earl. Thank you for the call today.
Hi, Joan. How are you?
Okay for now.
I just want to say with Ukraine, it's disgusting what happened today. I don't know what else to say. It boggles my mind that this is even real. You know, it's like a movie that we're living in right now. A bad movie.
A very bad movie. A very, very bad movie. I would walk out of this movie.
We have a 4-year-old daughter, and we want her to grow up. And it's not good.
No.
Somebody has to come in and stop this. It's insanity that Republicans just sit there with their hands behind their arses and don't do anything. And all they're worried about is the safety of their seats. And I just hope that the Democrats go out there, keep pushing it to these Republicans, keep doing what they're doing, because they're getting they're getting their butts handed to them at these town halls and just keep it up. And we got to win those 3 seats that are up for a special election, because this has to stop. There has to be some type of check and balance, because today what happened, hopefully it's a turning point in our country, but this needs to stop. And I hope that, people start speaking up and speaking out. These Republicans need to say something. And I hope that our former presidents get up, and now's the time to say something, because what we saw today was simply just disgusting. It's below the level of the presidency, and every American should be ashamed. And we did not, even the people that voted for him, you didn't vote for this.
No. I mean, there's those of us who've always felt he was bad news, but there were people who voted for him, and he is alienating the very people who voted for him. First, he's cutting off federal jobs, and a lot of the people who voted for him are out of work. A lot of the people who voted for him, farmers, are in danger of losing their farms. He's biting the hand that feeds him. And I think that people of this country, they don't agree with him. They don't agree with him that supporting Ukraine is a mistake. They understand, even if you were a former Republican, Ronald Reagan, man, oh man, he would have done anything rather than support Vladimir Putin. He opposed Russia at every turn, because that's what the Republican Party was all about.
They're simply in it for the money. They want to hold on to their seats, and it's disgusting. And Democrats just got to keep fighting and putting it, handing it right back to the Republicans and showing the American people that we stand with democracy. We don't stand with fascism. We don't stand with the dictators. We don't stand with Russia. We don't stand with the bad guys. We're the good guys, and we need to get that out there. We support Ukraine. We support NATO. We support being on the good side of history. And what we saw today was a slap in the face of our veterans and our military and everything else.
Yeah.
Just not good.
Not good at all. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the call. I'm going to go to Streamwood now. Cheryl is on the line from Streamwood, Illinois. Cheryl, thank you for the call. I appreciate it.
Thank you for taking my call, Joan. I'd like to share one contrasting opinion. I agree 100% with everything that's been said so far. I will be out door knocking for the Schaumburg Township tomorrow. But I would like to raise a point that I don't think anybody's remembering. What is today?
Today is the day where we hit them in their profits.
Right. And what are we going to be talking about?
Oh, you think he's doing this as a distraction from the fact that...
Oh, I do.
Well, ordinarily, I agree with you. I think Donald Trump is a master of the distraction, and that may have been part of the thinking about this. But I'm telling you, Cheryl, this is like, I know, I will light a match and that'll be a distraction. Oh, wait, I didn't see that there was a big can of gasoline here.
I cried all the way through that news conference this morning. I was embarrassed. I have called all of my representatives, both of Durbin and Duckworth. I have called John Thun's office because I was born in Sioux Falls. I reach out to these guys. You got to let them know how we feel.
Yep.
But I think this was aimed as a distraction to make us. Who's been talking about not shopping today? Nobody. Not after he went on with that goofy show.
Well, those of us who have been talking about it we're doing it anyway. I mean, I'm not spending any money today. I'm not spending any money at all. Ray and I are having a quiet day at home, and we're going to eat only the food that's in the refrigerator.
Yep.
and that's it.
Go for a walk and release your endorphins, because this is what he's trying to do, is distract us from the fact we already see what he is. We know he's not a president. He's a stubborn. So let's not give him the power of making us upset as well. We can speak out. We can fight back. I plan to be at the Women's March downtown on the 8th of March.
8th of March, okay.
I'm going to be there to let them know that I don't like what they've done. I don't like what they're doing. I think the treatment of the federal workers is abhorrent. But this was a wonderful distraction that he planned out.
Well, because...
You think about it. Why don't you ever let J.D. Vance talk?
That is a good idea, a good... We do not want to get distracted. So, Cheryl, today is Hit 'em in Their Profits, Friday, February 28th, economic blackout protest, not a march, just no spending for 24 hours, no online shopping, no grocery shopping, don't put gas in the car, don't use your credit card, don't use your debit card. Started at midnight, goes till midnight tonight. If you absolutely have an emergency and you have to buy something, shop local, a mom and pop shop in your neighborhood. Only in an emergency, but if you have it, that's where you go.
I agree.
Thank you for that, Cheryl.
Have a good day, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. We have to get to the news.
Okay.
We have more calls and more texts than I've ever seen before. We're going to get to all of it right after this.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
Time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
If you missed it, we had a blow up at the White House today. Not a bomb, at least not a physical bomb. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance cornered Volodymyr Zelensky, shouted at him, yelled at him, basically said, you need us, you don't appreciate us, you don't thank us enough, you don't do enough for us. Here's how the Guardian, the U.S., Guardian U.S. posted it. Bullying, berating Trump shows his worst self in Zelensky ambush. And apparently, after the whole incident where the Ukrainians were kicked out of the White House, Donald Trump said to somebody, because it's quoted in this story, "This is going to be great television," Donald Trump remarked at the end. Sure. And the captain of the Titanic probably assured his passengers that this would make a great movie someday. That's from David Smith's reporting in the Guardian U.S. And he couldn't be more right. The reaction from the rest of the world, once they pick their jaw up off the floor, is just that they stand with Ukraine, they support Ukraine, they understand that Russia was the aggressor here. Democratic lawmakers, according to other reporting in the Guardian U.S., Democratic lawmakers rushed to defend Volodymyr Zelensky after the Ukrainian leader was publicly berated by Donald Trump in a disastrous Oval Office meeting. That particular article is titled "Dummies for Putin. Democrats defend Zelensky after, quote, shameful Trump meeting." Dummies for Putin. And that's also a message that's coming in over and over again on the text line. Here's one example. President Zelensky was surprised by the low-quality production of the Putin puppet show. Everyone could see the hand sticking up Trump and Vance's pants, manipulating them. And I said a former Russian president, after this aired, posted that it was about time somebody stood up to the insolent pig. He's talking about Zelensky. The insolent pig. How dare he defy Russia? How dare he? Let's go to the phone lines. Chris from Chicago is on the line. Hey, Chris. Thanks for calling.
Joan, how are you? Thanks for taking my call.
Thanks for calling.
My call. So I think the outrage that I feel and the utter disgust and disgrace is unbelievable. I have never seen a president or a vice president conduct themselves in such just an unpresidential manner that disgraces our entire country on the world stage. I think that what world leaders need to do is isolate the United States. I think that they need to, the other day the King extended a invitation to Donald Trump and his family. I think it should be rescinded. And I think that they should just simply isolate him and not invite him to any event worldwide. And I think that the UN needs to stand together to support Ukraine. And I think that they need to make him out to be the pariah that he is.
Yeah.
It has never been more embarrassing to be an American than it is right now. I don't know if you listened to Malcolm Nance, but he, on his Substack the other day, had a complete rant and just went off the rails about how enraged he is about what is happening to our country after his years of service.
Yeah.
And I think he's right when he says it is time. It's going to take millions of people in this country to march, and I think the time is now.
If not now, when?
Exactly. As they are trying to take over. It's sad.
Yeah. I mean, what happened today was like nothing I've ever seen from the White House, even from Trump, even with his bumbling, stumbling, lying self. What happened today, the fact that they got Zelensky in there and then basically just shouted at him and beat him up and then threw him out of the White House. Yeah. It's just a disgrace. And, there's been talk when Trump was first reelected that maybe it was time for the European Union to have its own military. I mean, obviously the various countries that belong to the EU have a military, but maybe it was time to create a European military force. Whether or not they publicly ostracize the United States, privately, I have to believe that they will, because they can't count on us. With this lunatic we have in the White House, they can't count on us. We have a Russian agent leading our country. I wouldn't count on us. I wouldn't trust us.
I think Zelensky's bargaining tool should have been, why don't you give me back my nukes?
Oh, really? The nukes that he gave up to try to broker a peace, yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. I mean, they were like the third largest nuclear power in the world. They had the third largest arsenal of nukes. And so really, we broke that treaty. We brokered that treaty with Russia. We dishonored our end of the bargain. And therefore, they have the right to become a nuclear power because the treaty's gone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that really, there is no incentive for them not to create their own security, their own national security moving forward. And I think that I never thought I could see a day when our country would stand with a dictator. And it is appalling because I don't believe that's where Americans are. And I think that we need to rise up in this country because that's who we're going to be if we don't take control of our country.
Yeah. We've got to do something, because I don't know about J.D. Vance. I mean, as long as he has billionaire money behind him, I don't think he cares what people say. But even though he loves money, Donald Trump, I remember once Howard Stern, that shock jock, before he went to Sirius, he used to be really friendly with Donald Trump. He used to have Donald Trump on his show all the time. They were friends. And when Donald first told him that he was going to run for president, Howard Stern said, "That's a mistake. Don't do it." And Stern, in an interview, said, "I know what he wants. This is a guy who wants to be loved and admired. And being the president, should he get elected, he's not going to be loved and he's not going to be admired. And it's not going to bring him what he thinks it's going to bring him." So if there are massive protests, I don't think it will have any effect on J.D. Vance, because he's all about the money. But I think it could have an effect on Donald Trump. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I think that they need to see what the American people really think, because I don't believe that, I think that there was an article on Substack that somebody wrote about, why people want to see their country burn, because they feel, left behind, or they feel like the system has failed them. And I get that, because I think there's a lot of examples of that. But there's a way to do it. I mean, if you want to restructure government, you can do that. But in the meantime, what you're doing is completely destroying it and making it non-functional with nothing in place. And I think that's the whole point. The whole point is to weaken our society, to weaken the population, and to do it slowly without people paying enough attention until you really hit them with it, and then they have no control and no power. And I think that's why people really need to come to grips with what is really happening here. And I think that J.D. Vance, I agree with you, he's an educated pawn. Really isn't, just because you go to a high-level law school doesn't mean that you're really that educated. And I think that he's just someone who's also being manipulated for power and money. But I think the American people, on the other hand, really need to see that they have a lot more to lose, and there's a lot more of them than a lot more of us than there are of them.
Yes, and we have to remind them of that, Chris. And I thank you for the call. It is good to talk with you. We are going to take a real quick break, and we are going to go right back to the phone lines after this.
The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, Saturdays at 1 p.m.
Count me among the Americans that want to see change. Now, of course, the change I was looking for would have put Kamala Harris in the White House. Americans voted for change. They just, Trump, I think they got the wrong kind. Still, I'm grateful for elections, even when we lose. They tell us about ourselves, and we can't ignore that and shouldn't.
The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, Saturdays at 1 p.m.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
Our beloved president and his lapdog vice president had Volodymyr Zelensky sit down in the Oval Office so they could yell at him. They could yell at him and tell him how ungrateful he was to the United States, and that he better, if there's a negotiated ceasefire, man, they better do it, because they would have already lost if it hadn't been for the United States, and they owe us, etc., and so forth. Somebody texted in, Zelensky should have punched him in the mouth. What would have been the consequences? And they said, that's what you do with a bully. Somebody else has texted in. I don't know if you heard at the very end of the sound clip I played at the top of the show, a reporter shouted a question, which Trump, of course, couldn't hear. So J.D. Vance said, she's asking, what if Russia agrees to a ceasefire and then breaks it and then violates it? And Trump's response, well, I don't know. If they do, they do. I mean, what if a bomb drops on your head? Somebody texted in, wow, Trump really sounds more like a little kid than he ever has. What if a bomb drops on your head? Thought I was listening to my 5-year-old arguing. Yes, and a lot of people agreeing that Vladimir Putin is a very happy camper today. Let's go to our good friend Jim, who's on the line from Chicago. Jim, now let's take a few cleansing breaths, because, you know, you and I, we get really wound up here.
So all I can start out with is the American Messiah forgot his humanity today. He forgot his humanity this afternoon. But it was picked up by the ventriloquist dummy of Peter Thiel, adding insult to injury. And remember, we saw January 6th, Joan, and we swallowed that. So the American public, if they can swallow these things one day after the next, I'll be very shocked by it, because, again, I'd have to say that he has some kind of a supernatural quality to get away with this stuff. But and we know what that is, what end that is at. But when you think about poor Zelensky today, unbelievable. He comes with the best of faith and intention. Think of the people that have had to flee Ukraine. What do we have, 100,000 people, maybe 70,000 people?
Yeah, well, if we have 100,000 Ukrainian Americans in this country.
Right.
And I'd say more than half of them are in the Chicago area.
And I love that neighborhood, Joan. I used to trade at Chicago Avenue. I used to come from downtown. I love that neighborhood. But think about the sacrifice that these people have done against this threatened nuclear war at least 2 or 3 times that I can count. Putin. You use them on the battlefield. He's going to use them here. He's going to use them there. And then we have an absolute, with his faculties are completely shot. I mean, anybody can see it. Extemporaneously, if you sat in a room with him and peppered him with any kind of questions,
well, that's why I think Vance was there. That's why I think Musk was there when he sat down with Sean Hannity. That's why I think Musk showed up at the cabinet meeting, because they're managing this useful idiot that they have installed into the presidency.
And Peter Thiel's guy, the ventriloquist dummy, Vance said to, why don't you wear a suit? Well, where was the suit on that Afrikaner on Musk? Did he wear a suit? I didn't see a suit at that first cabinet meeting. He was wearing some
no, that's the whole thing. What Jim's referring to is there's a reporter who also happens to be Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, so he's a right-winger, and he said to Zelensky, like, why aren't you wearing a suit today? Where's your suit? And I don't think anybody said that to Elon Musk when he threw a sport coat on over a T-shirt, a graphic tee. And I couldn't quite read what the message was. Yeah, he's wearing a graphic tee to the White House. But Zelensky, who always wears clothing that reflects the fact that his country is at war, gets pushed back. You know, Jim, even the Wall Street Journal, which generally their reporting is really good. It's their editorial page that can be really crazy. Wall Street Journal, Trump-Zelensky meeting implodes, threatening peace talk. Vance and Trump tell Zelensky he hasn't been grateful enough for U.S. assistance in war.
But Joan, what is wrong with the American public? I saw January 6th. I didn't have to have people explain January 6th to me. I saw them say, rush the Capitol or you won't have a country. In this case, I watched the press conference for as much as I could stand, and I didn't need people to come out and explain it to me. I mean, I still got enough faculty to realize that this person is insane. I mean, he's totally insane. And think about our nuclear arsenal. Who's guarding that? Musk and Peter Thiel and the 4 or 5 billionaires? Are they going to dictate where the missiles are going to go? But anyway, Joan, at least it's February. At least it's February's over. I think if I make it through midnight tonight. Anyway, you have a great weekend.
Yeah, Joan. And then you have to get through March, Jim. So there.
You had to mention that. All right, Joan. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the call. Our good friend Bobby is on the line from Indiana. Bobby, what are you up to today?
Well, once again, I called my congressman and let them know why I don't wave the American flag anymore. It's just too embarrassing when you have an administration that does not represent your country, quite frankly.
Yeah.
They simply don't. It's traitorous. Well, I think that's the kindest way I think you can put it, right there. And then you can just keep going downhill from there. But that was total crap. What was done to Zelensky today? I mean,
yep.
I can't really put it in words.
Because words, it's like I don't know about you, Bobby, but I feel like I've never seen that kind of bad behavior from the White House in my entire lifetime. And I know in politics people get angry and there's harsh words exchanged behind the scenes. But it was almost like they were setting up Zelensky, like they had no intention of really having a conversation with Zelensky, that the whole thing was designed to make them look brave and them look tough. I don't get it.
Well, I don't know much about the brave and tough, but it was a setup. And no, you're not imagining. I'm 73 and pushing toward, but probably won't make it to 74. And I've never heard such talk at that level in public against someone who is someone on our side, someone, fighting, I forget who said, he is like Churchill in 1940. It's just, God knows, we would be talking German today, I think, if we'd have done that, because I don't know how we would have been able to win that war if we didn't have Britain in existence, so that we would have that stepping stone to get us over to Europe,
Yeah.
So I just don't know.
I don't either, Bobby. I just don't know. I've never seen anything like today. I do not recognize my country anymore. I do not recognize the United States. And while Trump is bad and J.D. Vance is bad, I think that we also have to hold every Republican in Congress, every Republican in the Senate, because they are the ones who are in power right now. They are the ones who can slow this train down, and they're enabling it. Bobby,
their people will have to do it.
Exactly. I agree with you. It is going to be the people who have to do it. Bobby, I want to, before we go to a break, I want to share with people one more thing that Mike Quigley said when he was on MSNBC. I already played you the clip where he said that this was embarrassing beyond comprehension, what happened in the White House today. He also said on MSNBC, what we've all been talking about here, our allies. He said he doesn't know if we even have any allies anymore. Listen to Mike Quigley.
I wonder what kind of conversations you have now and what this means, you think, for U.S. foreign policy and for our relationship with our allies.
I don't know if we have allies anymore. That would have sounded hyperbolic just a little while ago. We're putting tariffs on our closest, most important trade partners. We're telling NATO that it's on its own. We're telling the country that's involved with the greatest land war since the Second World War that we have been supporting for all the reasons we fought the Second World War, that they're on their own and we're extorting them for the second time in Trump time as president. So that's why I said I think we're less safe. It again goes back to the history. Presidents who have done the right thing since these have become an issue in the last century have all spoken eloquently in the opposite direction. FDR in his last inaugural said, "We have learned that we are dependent on the safety of other countries far away for our own welfare." John F. Kennedy said, "We will oppose any foe, and we will do everything we can to help any friend." The Reagan doctrine has been eviscerated by the Trump administration, that we will always stand up against Soviet aggression and our allies. I don't know who our allies are anymore. I certainly don't know who would trust us anymore.
That's the fallout. Oh, and by the way, they may have, in Donald Trump's words, created great television today, but they didn't get the one thing Trump said he wanted. They didn't get the mineral rights deal signed. And since they kicked Zelensky out, doesn't look like they're going to get that deal signed now, does it? We are going to take a break. We'll be back with more on this after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I've asked, even though we spoke to him earlier this week, I asked Joel Ostrow if he was free to come on the radio with us this afternoon to react to the absolutely jaw-dropping supposed news conference that Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Volodymyr Zelensky had at the White House. If you missed it, it was like a staged bit of theater. They didn't care what Zelensky had to say. They didn't really want to listen to him. They just yelled at him in the most disgraceful display of bad behavior I have ever seen from the White House. They yelled at him. He's not grateful enough. He better, if they negotiate a ceasefire, he better agree to it if he knows what's good for him. And by the way, we know you've said thank you before, but did you say thank you today? It was disgraceful. Of the rest of the world, the Western world, Western Europe, United Kingdom are all taking this opportunity to reiterate their support for Ukraine and the actual truth that Ukraine was indeed invaded by Russia, not the other way around. And as Mike Quigley said before we went to break, he doesn't know if we have any allies anymore. And God help us if our allies are now North Korea, Russia, and Iran. Have we become one of the bad guys? Joel posted an essay that he wrote today. Here's how it starts. The United States is now the greatest threat to freedom around the world, and it is time for all who value freedom, equality, and justice to recognize and oppose it. As a political scientist and expert in Russian politics, I do not write, say, or think this lightly, but it is the truth. And as an American, I will repeat it as often as I need to. When I pledged allegiance to the flag, I pledged allegiance not to the United States, but to the republic for which that flag stood, to liberty and justice for all. Joel Ostrow joins us now. I have never seen anything at the White House, Joel, like what happened today. It is jaw-dropping and not in a good way. Obviously you felt compelled to write this essay about it. Talk more about what you think and what you saw.
Well, we could talk about the travesty that is the United States dictatorship, or we could talk about the courage and heroism of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And let me just say, he demonstrated how those who love and wish to defend democracy must carry themselves. And he demonstrated what the world did not see in 1939 from Chamberlain and other leaders of democracies who kowtowed to a violent, murderous dictator who had aspirations on conquering other territories and eliminating freedom where it existed. They, in fear, tried to make nice and hoped that he would stop. And we have seen that in the month and a half since this regime has come to power. Mexican President Sheinbaum, Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau, French President Macron, and most recently British Prime Minister Starmer, smiling, shaking hands with, and playing nice with the dictator that occupies the White House. The United States of America is, in fact, now allied with Russia. I don't know about Iran, but I would say Russia and North Korea.
Well, they voted with it. I was referring to the fact that they voted with Iran in the United Nations.
Correct. And firmly against freedom. This regime in Washington has no respect for or allegiance to freedom, equality, justice, or democracy. They are intent on demolishing the rule of law, on demolishing rights and freedoms. They routinely spout hate and violence. And the president routinely embraces the violent, the murderous, the genocidal. And today there was supposed to be a boycott on shopping, but the lots at the supermarkets and other stores like Target and Walmart were full like they normally are.
Well, I haven't been out, so I can't tell you what's going on around here. And I do hope it has an impact. And also, by the way, as all this nonsense was coming out of the White House, there's also an attack on Social Security going on today. So far, 24 people have resigned. Social Security regions, there are 10 of them across the country. Well, apparently there's now only going to be 4 across the country. So, yeah, while this has been going on at the White House and attracting our attention, they're coming after Social Security. Don't believe
they're coming after the media, Joan. They're coming after free press.
They're coming for everything.
Whether it's the Washington Post censoring opposition viewpoints, or it's the White House banning those who refuse to spout its propaganda. We are not, as I said the other day with you, we no longer have a constitution. We are ruled by decree from the White House. The law no longer holds. We are a dictatorship under arbitrary rule, and those who are supposed to and who are pledged to enforce the law and defend the Constitution, to protect the Constitution, are in fact serving instead the decrees coming from the White House. And
not that this is any huge surprise, but as soon as this whole debacle started to really blow up, Lindsey Graham came out and said something along the lines of how he was never more proud of Donald Trump. Lindsey Graham, of course, being the windsock of a human being, and utterly invertebrate. So, but it features something that I've been talking about, that soundbite, the fact that by himself, Donald Trump would be annoying and bad, but with the Republicans who control the legislative branch choosing to look the other way, that's where we're really getting into trouble. The enabling. I've been reading a book about, different democracies around the world and the ones that fell and then took years to come back. And the reason they fall isn't because of the dictatorial leaders. It's because of the enablers. because the people who have a low commitment to democracy. Well, yeah, I like democracy, but I won't get reelected if I stand up. I won't get reelected if I fight this guy. So for my own personal situation, I'm just going to vote yes or, look the other way. Those are the people that kill us.
But those aren't the people who are really running things. It's Bezos and Zuckerberg and Musk. Those are the ones who are running things, Diamond and Goldman Sachs and all of them who after January 6th supported moves to isolate Trump and hold him accountable. For there was a brief time when they wouldn't contribute to those who spouted election denial. But after a couple of months, they all kowtowed to the dear leader, just starting with the former speaker and all the way on down. But it's all about the money. We are a corrupt kleptocracy run by a violent dictator, and this country has cast its lot with the other violent dictatorships and espouses the propaganda coming out of our leaders, treats the democracies and those who love freedom as at a minimum adversaries or at a maximum as enemies, is demonstrated today in the behavior towards Zelensky, who is the most fierce defender of and promoter of democracy and freedom in the world today. The most courageous by far.
The Guardian U.S. Posted in their reporting today statements that have been issued by almost every world leader you can think of that supports democracy. I was reading at the top of the show statements coming from at least 15 different world leaders basically saying, you know what? We stand with Ukraine. We think Ukraine is brave. We think Ukraine is doing the right thing. We want Ukraine to know that we're still with you. What an incredible repudiation. I mean, Mike Quigley, you may have heard that soundbite where he said he doesn't think we have any allies anymore. And I think he's right.
No, he's not. We do have allies. The allies are Russia, North Korea, maybe Iran, and the other dictatorships of the world, Hungary, Turkey. Quigley's wrong. And all of those statements, great. But talk is cheap. The United States should be kicked out of every democratic organization that exists. We should be kicked out of the G7 and the G20. We should be heavy sanctions should be imposed on all products the United States needs to be treated like the terrorist state that it's now cast its lot with.
I actually want to have a discussion with you about that because I'm of two minds. On the one hand, yes, I think we should be isolated and we should be the pariah that we are right now. But on the other hand, maybe it's smarter for these other countries in the long run to keep the lines of communication open in the hope that either they can make some headway with this administration or maybe that those lines of communication will be valuable when this administration leaves power. I want to have a discussion with you about that. Joel Ostrow, political science professor at Benedictine University. He and I will be right back after this.
You're listening to WCPT 820. Because facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Political science professor Joel Ostrow is an expert on Russia, our newest ally, and I'm of two minds on what you just said. On the one hand, I understand if the rest of the world wants to just cut us off, but on the other hand, maybe it's important to keep those lines of communication. You know, my first thought after seeing that press conference was we should be kicked out of NATO. You know, we are a drag on NATO at this point and not a supporter. But maybe it's smarter to take a long vision of, yeah, things are bad right now, but hopefully it's a bump in the road and things will get better. Better to have those lines of communication in place. What do you think?
Sanctions really work, but supporting undermines the values of those who support democracy and freedom. Why do we impose sanctions on Iran? The sanctions don't bring down the regime, but they hurt the regime. And the idea behind them is bring pain to the people so the people rise up and topple the dictatorship. It rarely happens, but economic harm does weaken a state. It weakens South Africa, particularly when divestment and disinvestment happened. Ultimately, those brought crippling harm to the regime and cost it support of a lot of the white minority that was benefiting, at least the British white minority there, not the Afrikaans, like Musk. The idea behind crippling sanctions against the United States in isolation would be to wake the population of this country out of its stupor and to basically to tank our economy, to cause a depression and massive unemployment that would finally wake people up to go into the streets for a general strike and to alter and abolish and institute new government here. It's the only hope.
Yeah. There was an article, I don't know, time. It could have been, I think it was yesterday, could have been a few days ago. I have no concept of time anymore.
Hard to keep track, isn't it?
Yeah. But there was they focused on this young woman who voted for Trump, and she works for the Park Service, and now she's out of a job.
Oopsie.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're seeing a lot of that kind of thing. But she also said that her family, she comes from a very small town that's very far right. Mm-hmm. And she was saying that just her grandmother just this other day said that she thought Trump was doing a great job. Mm-hmm. I don't understand that. I don't understand. Are those people who hate black people and they see Donald Trump as restoring whiteness back to the United States of America? Are people really foolish enough to think that there's enough government waste that these agencies should just be gutted? And, if Target wanted to cut their payroll or cut waste, would Target say, okay, we're going to close every store across the United States, we're going to fire every employee, and then we're going to look to see who's really valuable? And when we figure that out, we'll bring them back. No company would ever work like that. What does Grandma think is so great?
On this, I agree in part with my podcast host, Brian Endless, political science professor at Loyola, who's been on with you frequently. Mm-hmm. I don't think that hate and racism are underneath it. I think it's anger. 40 years of lack of increase of real income for
I think those things
the majority
are true
of the population.
I think the unspoken major reason for Donald Trump's ascendance, I believe it's race. I mean, yes, there was some misogyny mixed into it.
It's a tool, though.
But I really think that this is people who want America to be white again.
But he tapped into the anger as a vehicle to come to power. When people are angry, they're angry, and but the people were already angry by the declining real income and what I
think a lot of people were angry because they feel that black people are being given a leg up and women should go back to the kitchen. And wouldn't it be great if white men didn't have to deal with any of that competition? Wouldn't it be better, and wouldn't their lives be so much more fulfilled?
Joan, that's certainly the rhetoric from the extremist right MAGA movement. But it gives the ordinary person or family that has moved from middle class to lower middle class or threatened with poverty a direction to point the finger that isn't those who are seeking power. And they use that anger that they can foment to put themselves in power and enrich themselves by deceiving the people. People who want an improvement in their material lives and who for 40 years have been abandoned by both parties are angry. And MAGA and Trump have given them a place to point the finger. And seeing that anger, they think something's going to change and anything can be better than what the last 40 years have been. Bernie Sanders tried to spread a message of we need to change our policies back to what they were when our policies benefited the majority of people and stop benefiting the richest few. That message resonated, but the rest of the Democratic Party never picked it up. And Hope and Change got co-opted by Goldman Sachs and President Obama, who did a lot of good, ended up in their pockets of big pharma and big money.
I was talking to a Democrat yesterday about Bernie Sanders' ability to be, quote unquote, authentic and to speak to people in a way that they understand and in a way that resonates with them. But I see very few people in the Democratic Party or in elected office who have tapped into that or tried to create that in their own areas. And I don't understand why.
It's because the Democratic Party has, since 1992, been owned by big corporate interests and moved too far to the center. As income inequality has grown by leaps and bounds and continues to, more and more people have been left behind, and the party has lost its voice to communicate. President Biden tried to recapture and succeeded in large part in recapturing the trust of the abandoned middle and lower middle class. He's the only sitting president who ever went to a picket line. There's a reason for that. And it wasn't cynical. He truly, through his whole career, was a man in support of the middle class and of union labor. But it can't just be about unions. It needs to be explaining to people that that by reorienting our policies away from the super rich, people will have better schools for their children, better economic opportunities as a result of better education and health care, and investments in their communities. That this money that continues to go to the rich does not go to benefit them in any way, shape, or form. In fact, the policies, as we're seeing now, harm the average people. They're taking away from Medicare, taking away from Medicaid, taking away from Social Security, and moving it into the hands of Trump and Zuckerberg and Diamond and Musk and the rest. The Democrats continue to lack a powerful enough voice to counter that with a message that taps into the anger in a constructive way and can move people. And at this point, it's gone so far to the right in this country that really I believe a general strike is the only way to turn things around, and that's going to take help from the democracies around the world in isolating and opposing our country economically and politically.
Do you mean when you say an economic strike? Are you talking about how you've already mentioned how other countries you feel should treat us? But, like we see this all the time. There'll be a national strike in Greece. There'll be a national strike in France. They're protesting this or that. Change. But what would it take for that sort of thing to happen in the United States? Because remember, 70-some million people voted for Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of those people are being harmed by the policies going into place now. And it's going to take some kind of economic catastrophe to move enough of those people The action is not going to work, not shopping, not spending money on anything other than very extreme local businesses. No more Starbucks, go to the local coffee shop. No more Target, no more Amazon. But it'll also require not going to work, shutting down the economy for an extended period of time, so that those oligarchs in power feel real harm. I
agree.
What happens? What do the people with the guns do when the White House orders them to shoot?
It'll be interesting to see the fallout from today and find out whether or not this hit them in their profits economic blackout protest that is supposed to be taking place right here, right now, once we have some data, it'll be interesting to see what the bottom line was for this. Because, I think that we don't have a culture of general strikes.
But we have a culture of protest. This country was built on protest.
Yes,
we
protest.
threw the damn tea into the harbor. We've lost it.
Where are those people when you need them?
Zelensky is the inspiration, and the leaders that I mentioned, Trudeau and Sheinbaum from Canada and Mexico, our closest neighbors, and Macron and Starmer from our closest allies, need to not just speak, they need to act, and they need to act decisively with Zelensky, but not only in support of Ukraine, but in opposition to the United States and our new allies, this new axis. They need to not just say it, but they need to act on the recognition that the United States is now the greatest threat to freedom and democracy around the world, because we are. And to anyone listening, as Joan mentioned, I studied the Soviet Union. I studied Russia. I lived there at the time at the end of the Soviet Union. And I shared the hopes of those in Russia who fought hard to try to create a democracy. And so many of those have taken bullets to the back of the head by the dictator who seized power in Russia. I love democracy. I am committed to the truths we hold to be self-evident. I am not anti-American. I'm an American patriot, but I don't recognize the United States of America that exists today because the United States of America that I came to love no longer exists.
How is it, Joel, that we've done such a bad job educating people? Because we're talking about how even Trump supporters are being hurt by his policies. All the information we needed to know about what kind of a second term this guy would have, it was all out there. It was all available. Maybe not on Fox Cable, maybe not on OANN, but the information for anybody who spent even 15 minutes, the information was there. Are we just a completely ignorant country? Do we not care about educating ourselves? Do we care more about what grandma says than what we actually think about and read for ourselves? The woman who lost her job with the Park Service, the woman who voted for Trump, she said that she didn't want to vote for Trump because she believed he was a sexual assaulter. She believed he lied about assaulting women. But, he said on the campaign trail that IVF was going to be free, and she and her husband were trying to have a baby, and wouldn't that be great? And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, you knew this guy was a sexual assaulter and a liar, and you believed it when he said, I'm going to make IVF free? I mean, how stupid are we?
Yeah, well, do I need to answer that question?
Oh, no, you better not. You'll get us both into deeper trouble.
But 45 years of trickle-down have harmed the average American so much because it's all been, flood up, not trickle down. Mm-hmm. And people are so disoriented by the 45 years of harm that this economic system has brought to us, except for, a couple hundred of the richest families in the world, that really neither party has offered any antidote to that. It's always been more of the same until Trump came around. The people didn't vote for Republicans. People voted for MAGA. People want something different. I agree with Brian on that. Unfortunately, the different that they got was a hateful, violent dictatorship.
Yeah, kind of like what we're starting to look like. Joel, we've passed our time to go to news. Thank you. No, it is not a happy Friday.
But it's been a nice week. I get to talk to you twice. Thank you.
Yes, Jim. Well, that is an upside. We are going to take a break for news, and we are going to be back with more after this.
Hey, where's Hal Sparks? I'm not sure where he is now, but I know where you can find him Saturdays at 11. He'll be right here on WCPT 820 for the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito, live.
Celebrating our power to bring about change.
Local.
Everybody has to work together.
And progressive.
I think you get the idea.
On WCPT 820.
Whew. I am very pleased to welcome back to our program political science professor Suzanne Chod from North Central College. You know, Suzanne and I had exchanged emails. There were a number of things we were going to talk about, but no. I got no words. So Suzanne is going to really handle the next hour. I'm going to just sit here and thump my head quietly against my desk. I would never, Suzanne, in a million years, even with Trump, I would never have believed that a display of bad behavior like we saw today would happen from the White House. When you saw that press conference with Vance and Trump and Zelensky, where they basically, it was almost like a setup where they got him there to rip him a new one. What went through your mind?
Yeah, I know. Thanks, Joan. I was thinking the same thing as I was watching it. I was thinking, there goes our whole agenda out the window, which is totally fine. We could talk about those things another day, but I tend to be sort of a reactionary in terms of verbal and body language when I'm stunned by something. And my kids are home today, and they heard me go, "Ooh!" And they thought like something was wrong. Something in the house had happened or something was wrong. And yes, something is wrong, but maybe not what they thought. And I think my visceral reaction was not as much that I'm surprised by what Vance and Trump were saying, but I was more surprised by the fact that this was happening on display, this sort of toxically masculine, Vance said chest thumping, talking about Biden. I thought that was hypocritical in so many ways. And that it was happening in the Oval. And then as it was happening, they were blaming Zelensky for the tone and tenor of the end of the conversation. Just the fact that I was watching this unfold in the Oval Office, and the people who were the ones who were engaging in the disrespect were the ones who occupy that office.
Yeah. And they kept, at one point, Trump even says when Zelensky's trying to answer something Trump has said, he goes, no, it's not your turn to talk now. Well, what is he doing there?
Yeah. I think, we know this about Trump, and it was been interesting to see him engage with Macron and with the Prime Minister of the UK earlier this week, especially with Macron when he corrected him and sort of put his hand over, towards him, that we know that President Trump does not like to be interrupted. We know that he doesn't like to, or feel interrupted, I should say, or be fact-checked. And so I think just the fact that what President Zelensky was trying to do in the moment was to ask a genuine question to the vice president when he said, no other president, we've been engaging in diplomacy. And Zelensky was asking a genuine question, but Trump and Vance took it as an affront to them personally, which is then why Vance goes in on, you have no gratitude. Why are you not thankful? Mm-hmm. Zelensky wasn't going to kiss the ring, proverbially, and there's nothing that makes Trump more upset than when someone won't do that.
It was an extraordinary display, and I agree with you. Trump does not like to be corrected, and when French President Macron, Donald Trump was saying that, well, the money we gave Ukraine, we just gave it to them, but Europe, when they gave money to Ukraine, it was structured as a loan, so like they can get their money back. And Macron touched him and was like, no, actually, most of the money we've given Ukraine is not going to be returned to us. And he interrupted Trump, he corrected Trump, and he touched him. Oh, yes. No. And then the same thing with the UK Prime Minister. The UK Prime Minister didn't touch Trump. But again, when Trump was going off on that same line we gave all this money to Ukraine, and Europe structured it as loans. And the prime minister, again, interrupted him and said, no, that's actually not quite right. There are millions of dollars that we have sent off to Ukraine. And when Macron said it, I don't know if you heard the second part, and Macron was like, oh, no, it's actually a smiley. That's actually not quite right. And then exactly. Donald Trump kind of looked at the floor and looked at the reporters and looked back at the floor and said, well, that's not how I see it. That's not how I see it. Like, you can say that if you want to, but I don't think that's right.
Well, if I could just say that's very typical for President Trump as well. He sort of deflects. If he is fact-checked, he will say a number of things. He'll either say, well, that's not how I see it, or that's not how I understand it, or often he'll say, well, that's not what I was told, as opposed to taking the responsibility.
I love that one.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's interesting, because just this week, and because there's been so many meetings, I can't remember which one, where he referenced that phrase, the buck stops with me. And so I find it interesting. You can't say the buck stops with me and then also say, well, that's not what I was told, and defer and deflect to your staff. You can't do both of those things. And I think that's where this tension with Donald Trump is so interesting, where in one moment he wants to be seen as the one who has all of the information, knows all of the things, and makes all of the decisions. But then when he's challenged on those things, or when he's asked to give specifics that he doesn't have, he then pivots and says, well, that's not, that's someone else's role, or I've delegated to them, or that's not what they told me. And
bottom line,
he's never be true.
He's never wrong, and he's never responsible for anything that isn't well received. If you liked it, then it's absolutely something he did or he said. But if you don't like it, that he either doesn't know about it, somebody else did it. This is not a guy who buck stops here. That's the most absurd thing that's ever come out of his mouth. He's the exact opposite of that. CNN is reporting that Donald Trump's envoy to Ukraine, I don't know if he knew what was coming, because CNN is reporting that he told Ukraine, don't do that. Don't have a White House meeting. Don't do it. And that the Ukrainian people were kind of like, what do you mean? Of course we're going to do it. So I wonder if this whole thing was a setup. We've given Putin some pleasure. What was it? The former President Medvedev. Mendeved. Which said that it's so wonderful to see the White House standing up to the insolent pig. So was it a sop to Putin? Did J.D. Vance say, oh, my God, I've got this great idea. You're going to look so strong and you're going to look so tough. When we sit down with Zelensky, let's tag team him and we'll just really go after him. Because they didn't give him he couldn't get a word in edgewise.
No. And, I've been thinking about this a lot, Joan, actually, because I didn't know that Vance was going to be in the meeting. And then as I'm watching it and I see that he's there, and as we know, Vance has been quite invisible in these meetings, as Musk has taken on a larger role in a lot of these more forward-facing meetings, and Vance has been kind of on the proverbial trail, so to speak. And so I wonder if the strategy, because Vance has been so critical of Ukraine and of the resources that we've provided, and has forwarded that tagline that Trump is now forwarding, that it's Ukraine's fault that they were invaded and all of this. And so I wonder if there was an opportunity that either Vance presented or that Trump presented to say, let's have him in the room, because we know vice presidents often act as sort of the pit bull, right? And I know that that's one of the things that Trump liked about Vance. And so I wonder if there was like a little bit of that thought process involved. And I thought about this after, actually, because as Vance opens up that question, that then kind of devolves everything. And one of the things he says is, I think it's disrespectful to litigate all this in front of the media, in front of the U.S. media, to try to embarrass us. And then later Trump says, well, the reason I let this go on for so long was because I think the American people should see you for who you really are. I'm paraphrasing a bit there. And so, again, I'm thinking about kind of this idea that, Trump is now taking credit for this thing that happened that maybe wasn't intentional to say, now I'm going to, say that we wanted all of this to unfold so we could expose Zelensky, so to speak, for who he really is, which, to be honest, and, your favorite of mine, Bill Muck, and I were texting about this earlier, the big winner in all of this is Putin and Russia. The big winner in all of this, and while Ukraine is obviously the biggest sort of loser, so to speak, in this, so is the whole of Europe, who now has to step up and take way more responsibility for their own preservation and safety than they would have had before 3 hours ago.
Yeah, I want to talk more about this. We need to take a break. I'm talking to political science professor Suzanne Chad from North Central College. We will be back after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
If you are thinking of buying a place or refinancing a place, maybe you're a CPA or even a divorce attorney, and you're wondering why your mortgage professional is not returning your calls, well, there could be a very good reason for that. A lot of mortgage professionals have left the industry. Team Hochberg says that in the last 2 years, 165,000 loan officers have not renewed their licenses. That's 165,000 people leaving the profession. Team Hochberg, on the other hand, has been adding loan officers. They are stronger than ever, and they'd love to earn your business. I've refinanced with them 2 or 3 times, and they make what is to me a very painful process as easy as it can possibly be. So let's look here. In the past 24 months, a lot of mortgage companies have closed. More than 165,000 loan officers have left the business. Team Hochberg has expanded and is stronger than ever. So if you'd like to work with an experienced mortgage professional, do what I did. Call Team Hochberg, 855-563-2843, or go online, 56david.com. That number again is 855-563-2843, or go online, 56david.com. Lower.com equal housing lender, NMLS 1124061.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Political science professor from North Central College in Naperville, Suzanne Chad, is here. We are talking about the outrageous, disastrous White House press conference that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance had with Volodymyr Zelensky today, where they basically shouted at him. They wouldn't let him finish a sentence. He was ungrateful. He was absolutely ungrateful and needed to say thank you. And I have 2 things to say about that right now. One, if Trump is such a smart businessman, Suzanne, wouldn't he have gotten Zelensky to sign the mineral rights deal before he threw him out of the White House? Wouldn't that have been a smart business move?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot and talking to students about it because, as we know, the deal, we use the word deal now because that's all the only word that he uses, didn't have any guarantee for security. Now, so the idea that this narrative that was being pushed was that the deal was done, that it was going to be signed. They had the table laid out, the flags and all of that. But Zelensky has never said outright, which we wouldn't expect him to, that he was going to sign it. And nor should we expect him to if there was nothing in there that was going to secure a free and sovereign and self-determined Ukraine. And so it's not surprising that it wasn't signed. And this sort of the backstory of all of this, right, would be that, well, of course the U.S. would provide the safety and security because we want those resources and all of that. But Zelensky's the smarter one in this play because he walked in there without having signed it. And I think to your point, if the deal was solid enough and was the right deal, so to speak, then it would have already been agreed to and they would have signed it when he walked in the door, as opposed to having this meeting and having a lunch that never happened with the long table and the pens that were never used.
Yep. So crack businessman strikes again. I want to also go back to something you and I talked about in the first segment, the fact that J.D. Vance was, there was, when you see the wide shot, there were a lot of people in the room. Marco Rubio was in the room. There were other people in the room. But Vance, the way a lot of the cable networks framed it, you got the impression that it was just the three of them, Zelensky, Trump, and Vance. Vance was seated right up close with them and clearly was, at one point, Vance almost did a Macron. Vance was talking, and I don't know if he got the impression that Trump was going to start talking, and Vance's hand goes out like he's going to touch him, and it clearly signaling to Trump, I'm not done here. It was amazing. And here's what I think, and I want you to tell me whether or not this makes sense to you or you think that I've invented this in my brain. I think the reason we've seen so much of Musk is not because Donald Trump wants to share the spotlight with Elon Musk, but he loves Elon Musk's money and is not going to jeopardize that. And J.D. Vance represents, if not Musk, at least Peter Thiel's money. And I think they have learned that Donald Trump can be managed and that he can be intimidated because of the power and money they represent. Because why else would a man who we've all pretty much agreed to is an incredible narcissist, he's going to share the spotlight so willingly? And he did. He has not pushed back against Musk. He has not pushed back against Vance. He didn't even push back against Musk when Musk's kid was telling him to shush and putting boogers on his desk, for God's sake.
We were all of us were that kid that day, right? All of us were like, yes, go kid. Yeah. No, again, such good questions, Joan, and I don't think that you manifested this in your brain, right? Because to your point, Trump likes part of the personality, part of what we know about him. He wants to be the center of attention and all the things. And so thinking about, and this honestly is the same conversation we have about why Kim Jong-un and Putin and Netanyahu and Erdogan and others, why he has such a buddy relationship with other authoritarians, is because what they know is if they flatter Donald Trump and they make him feel big and bad and powerful, then he is malleable. He is manipulated. He can be manipulated. And I think we see this for sure with Musk, because look at the government contracts that now have expanded since Musk has been working with the president, and the firings of the inspectors general and other oversight officers in the agencies that are overseeing contracts that are still pending or potential investigations under the previous administration with some of Musk's business dealings. And so this is a strategic choice on Musk's part. He knows exactly how to get what he wants out of the president. And the president, maybe he knows that that's what's happening, but he also likes to surround himself with big, bad, seemingly powerful, masculine people. And so it serves his interest, even if some of the attention is off of him.
Yeah. Donald Trump, again, in this White House news conference, as he has done before, trashed Obama and Biden. And this idea, he was trying to, on the surface of it, he was trying to tell Zelensky that if he and Putin negotiate a ceasefire, well, Zelensky better just fall into line. And when, I don't know if you heard this part, when one of the reporters in the room said, well, what if Russia violates the ceasefire? And he goes, well, what if they do? What if they do? What if a bomb falls on your head? That is the child we have in the White House.
Well, I think that exchange actually is so critically important. And if we go just back a little further to when everything devolved, when what Zelensky was trying to communicate to Trump and Vance, since Vance was the one that kind of brought this up, was this is, this last war in the past 3 years, this goes back to 2014 with the invading of Crimea. He was talking about the land grab, the people his people are constantly being killed. And he was calling out the U.S. government in general across a decade to say, where were all of you? Where was the diplomacy when Europe was helping, when we were trying to negotiate with Putin? And then he violated everything. Where was the United States? And it was a genuine question that should force all of us to reckon with our foreign policy more generally and potential failings or not of previous presidents. But what happened then instead is that Vance and Trump take it as a personal affront. And to your point, they start going out and attacking other presidents, going back to the tagline of Biden is a low IQ individual and he was stupid and this and that. And when then pushed from a reporter to ask, like, okay, but what is your role in this if Russia violates a ceasefire? He doesn't have a serious answer for it, and so uses hyperbole in the things that he typically does. And I find this to be the case with him more generally in this term compared to the first, is that he's not pushed for details. He's pushed even less for details in the first month of his presidency than he was in his previous presidency.
He hasn't been pushed really by the media. He hasn't been pushed really at all. I mean, Lawrence O'Donnell talked about how in his first administration there was one reporter that basically said to him at one point, why do you keep lying about this stuff, whatever they were talking about?
Right.
And that reporter, again, was like, why do you keep telling people that they're not going to pay more because of tariffs when everybody acknowledges that American consumers are going to pay more because of your tariffs? And he was like, I don't agree with that. I think the tariffs are going to be paid by the other countries. I mean, but nobody's pushing back against him like they did in the first administration.
Not as much. And I think actually why, which funny transition, was one of the topics we were maybe going to talk about today, is because of the FCC changes that are likely coming, that the White House press pool is now being controlled not by the association, but by the White House instead. And so, the AP not getting access, all of these things.
Well, the White House announced it's not a right of the media to be there. It's a privilege. It's a privilege, Suzanne.
That's right. And the privilege only exists for you if you don't challenge or if the questions you ask are full of mis and disinformation. And so there's physical changes in the White House compound that are showing in the press pool area and in the communications wing of who has access. And I will just say also, if I could quickly, that especially when we have all of these foreign leaders coming and the press from those countries are asking Donald Trump questions, he's been incredibly offensive towards them, talking about how he can't understand them, pushing them off.
Well, he didn't understand what the woman said. No, he was like, he was like, what? And finally, J.D. Vance says, she's asking you this.
He had to, yes. And so this is another thing that we're seeing. And I was thinking about this actually as Zelensky was talking, because it has been more obvious, I think, to me in this administration with President Trump that he either is not listening as intently or is maybe because of, his not advanced age, but he's older than he was when he was president the first time. And then hearing that he often can't understand what the reporters are saying, that, maybe he just doesn't listen to what they're saying and so kind of goes off in these other directions. But especially when he is rude and offensive towards journalists from other countries and pushing them off and saying, I'm not answering your question because I can't understand you. I mean, that to me is offensive and problematic. I just wanted to sort of throw that in there.
Oh, I agree. I'm talking to political science professor Suzanne Chad from North Central College in Naperville. We are going to continue our discussion when we come right back after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joining me is political science professor Suzanne Chad from North Central College. We have been talking about the outrageous events that took place today in the White House, where J.D. Vance and Donald Trump basically just sat there and yelled at Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He was threatened. If we negotiate a ceasefire, you better agree to it. You're not grateful enough. You should be saying thank you right here, right now. Excuse me. There has been a lot of reaction in Western Europe, all of it in support of Ukraine, which everybody was everybody around the world was really stunned by this press conference. Suzanne, one of the CNN reporters in Moscow said that, officially, the people in Moscow he talked to were all saying, like, yeah, this is great, this is good. But he said, when I spoke to them, but what they said to me privately was that they were gobsmacked by what they saw come out of the White House. And I want to share, apparently, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, has, since that performance, spoken to both Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky and said that he retains unwavering support for Ukraine and is doing all he can to find a path forward to a lasting peace based on sovereignty and security for Ukraine. The Prime Minister looks forward to hosting international leaders on Sunday, including President Zelensky. Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, is calling for an immediate summit between the United States, Europe, and allies to discuss how to deal with the great challenges of today, starting with Ukraine. Every division of the West makes us all weaker and favors those who would like to see the decline of our civilization. A summit without delay is needed between the United States, European states, and their allies to talk frankly about how we intend to tackle today's major challenges, starting with Ukraine, which together we have defended in recent years. What's your reaction to statements like that?
There's a couple of things I would, going back just a little bit to the last few weeks, and in particular with the outcome of the German election, and then with J.D. Vance not meeting with the current chancellor, but meeting with the head of the far-right party. Some of the other things that we've seen and the language that's been used, which is very sort of turning against Europe and turning more into the United States and calling out Europe for not being on the side of free speech and talking about how it's, we don't share the same values anymore. And so it's emboldening of far-right movements in Europe, turning away from it. And then now what happened in the White House today, leaders of the developed nations in Western Europe, these statements that we're hearing, it's so interesting because it's invoking this like Cold War language of existential threat and crisis, world order. I mean, that is how serious these European leaders are taking this general movement of the United States away from these important allyships and making the world less safe. And today was one of those days where it has hit a point where it not only was it already incumbent upon the European leaders, but you hear the urgency, especially with the Italian leaders' language of how we have to do this now, how they have to do this now. It's urgent. It's incredible.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Giorgia Meloni is herself a very conservative prime minister of Italy. This is not like, she's not like the AOC of Italy by any stretch.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, of course, she's not as far right as, merging parties in other nations, even her own. But yeah, I mean, you wouldn't look at her, you wouldn't say she was like Labour in the UK, right? Absolutely not. And again, there's a couple of things, and this is where, where Bill Muck, our colleague, is so great about talking about the intricacies of this. But, Zelensky and Trump are not wrong when they say that, this does ring different for Europe because we have an ocean between us, right? But we are also a superpower, and we have created that environment since World War II, and it benefits us to stay that way for so many reasons. But this strategy that Donald Trump is engaging in is not the way to keep the United States a superpower. This is a way for us to end up being retreated to the margins as other powers in the world, being European powers, but what the Italian leader is talking, really she's talking about Putin rising up and maybe even other forces to take over these nations that have kept world order for so long.
Mike Quigley said earlier today on MSNBC with Chris Jansing that he doesn't necessarily think we have any allies anymore. I remember, was it Angela Merkel when Biden went to the first big European meeting and he was like, America, we're back. And somebody, I don't know if it may have been Merkel, said yes, but for how long? And, that was apparently that was prescient because, indeed, it didn't last very long. How will they ever trust us again? Will they? Is it gone?
Well, and this is exactly right, is that when President Trump was in office the first time and these allyships were frayed so significantly, and then Biden comes back in and says exactly what he said, not only is it for how long, but it's also the restoring and repairing of those allyships does not happen overnight. It took the 4 years Biden was in office for nations to feel like during that time, especially once Russia invaded Ukraine, that the U.S. was like really in it. We were not isolationists. We were in it to, maintain peace and security throughout the world, right? Mm-hmm. But now, and as it became more clear as we moved through the election cycle, nations were already preparing for Trump to win and had already been making movements that we could notice to say, like, we're not going to be able to really rely on them. But what I don't think they were prepared for, as unpredictable as President Trump is, even though we knew he was going to come in as an authoritarian, I don't think any of us could have predicted how quickly and aggressively this has devolved. Mm-hmm. And today is sort of the moment we see how far into this, as the United States, how far into this authoritarian state we are in. Bill always talks about how in Trump's first term he was authoritarian curious, or he would dip his toe in authoritarianism. Yeah. And I love that, right? I love that. And I think that now he's fully submerged and he's taking us with him. And today what it shows is he's trying to, maybe not intentionally, but pulling other nations down with us. And how do we recover from that? And we're only a month and a half into his presidency.
Yeah. At the beginning of the show today, The Guardian U.S. had comments right after this meeting became public, comments from 15 different world leaders. And it was all basically the same message. We stand with Ukraine, always have, always will. That was from world leaders. Charlie Sykes just posted, the former conservative radio host from Wisconsin, now a cable news contributor, always never Trumper. He got some reactions from people. Liz Cheney said, in part, today Donald Trump and J.D. Vance attacked Zelensky and pressured him to surrender the freedom of his people to the KGB war criminal who invaded Ukraine. History will remember this day when an American president and vice president abandoned all we stand for. Tom Nichols, who used to teach at the War College, again, not a bleeding liberal, who writes for The Atlantic, wrote Friday, February 28th, 2025, will go into the history books as one of the grimmest days in American diplomacy, the beginning of a long-term disaster every American, every U.S. ally, and anyone who cares about the future of democracy will have to endure. With the White House's betrayal of Ukraine capping a month of authoritarian chaos in America, Putin, along with other dictators around the world, can finally look at Trump with confidence and think, one of us. David French, this is utterly shameful. This is Vladimir Putin's best outcome. The U.S. is placing pressure on a free nation fighting for its life while giving aid and comfort to an authoritarian thug. And finally, one more from Mona Charen. We are a completely different country from what we were 2 months ago. Bully, aggressor, Putin suck-up, betrayer of allies, rude, crude, dishonest. The most dishonorable display by an American president in our lifetimes. Political science professor Suzanne Chod and I are going to weigh in on some of that when we come right back after this.
You're listening to WCPT 820.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by North Central College political science professor Suzanne Chod. We have been talking about the reaction to the disgraceful display that came out of the White House today when Donald Trump and his lapdog J.D. Vance sat with Volodymyr Zelensky and basically yelled at him the whole time that if they make a deal, he better agree to it, that they wouldn't be anywhere without the United States, that they should be more appreciative, that he should say thank you more often. Right before we went to break, I was playing some of the reaction from American journalists and writers. I started the day with reaction from world leaders. And I've got to tell you, Suzanne, you know, on Fridays for the first half of the show, I take calls. And I had two people call in who were in tears. One of them, a 70-something retired Marine, who said he never thought he would see his country like this. They were both in tears. It is an extraordinary day, and not in a good way.
Mm-mm. No, I think, Joan, I appreciate you bringing up the emotional component of this, because we spend a lot of time, as we should, right, talking about the political implications. We can, talk about political science. We can sort of break this down. But, you think about the people like you just described, for example, who have spent their whole life fighting against, quite literally, as members of the armed forces, fighting against dictatorship, fighting against, we go for far back, fighting against communism, but fighting for freedom and for liberty and self-determination and autonomy. And I think what I got from today is that liberty and self-determination and autonomy are only reserved for some. And I think we knew that about President Trump's philosophy already. But it's okay if it's at the expense of others, and not just others in our country, but the world at large. And that is an emotional thing to sort of work through for those of us who really believe in democracy and what it can provide when it's equitable and when we live up to the promise that we could, because we have the tools to do it, but there's been a strategic choice to not use those tools and, in fact, to try to dismantle them.
Mm-hmm. It is emotional. And as I told those people who called in tears, I understand that. It is gut-wrenching. Only I've learned over the years that if I'm starting to feel weepy, the best thing for me is to get angry, because the anger just sort of burns out any of the weepiness. I want to also mention one thing that was also in Charlie Sykes' emergency column. He didn't just quote the people who've always been criticizing Trump, but he also quoted Isaac Shore, who's a conservative columnist, and often, as Charlie says, he's often a critic of the never-Trumpers. And even he said, do these people hear themselves? First, there are the outright lies. The verbal brawl between the three men began not because Zelensky was rude or came in looking for a fight, but because Trump and Vance were criticizing their guest. And he said, even setting aside the mendacious, lying retelling of what happened in the Oval Office, though, this is a staggering indictment of Donald Trump. And this is from a conservative columnist. What some people are hoping is that, we've seen people who voted for Trump getting deported. We've seen people having their loved ones deported. We've seen people who voted for Trump losing their jobs and now going, what? Huh? How did this happen? And there is incredible support for Ukraine in this country. It's almost like Donald Trump is doing everything possible to light the fire under the resistance. What do you think?
Yeah, yes, I think that's right. And I think, I say this to my students all the time, and I didn't make this up, I didn't create this language, but we say it in political science a lot. Elections have consequences, and we study those consequences. We map those consequences. We try to forecast those consequences. And for those of us who are not surprised by what's happening, and maybe a little surprised at like what actually happened today, but not particularly surprised by what's been happening over the past 5 weeks, we knew this was going to happen. And we knew that the choice to, take a second helping of a Trump presidency was going to get us sort of somewhere around here. And so for those who are being deeply affected at a very personal level, and if I could add to your list when those Medicaid cuts are coming, and they are coming, a good proportion of people who voted for President Trump are on Medicaid. And there are House members who serve in districts where a supermajority of their constituents are on Medicaid. And those cuts are coming. And so if this is not the thing, what was on display in the Oval Office today, because it still feels far away, right? Ukraine feels far away. What happens to, Western Europe feels far away. And so I think a lot of people are going to look at this, if they know about it at all, and either say, well, it doesn't really affect me because it's far away, or attaboy, Trump, stand up for us, stand up for what's right, get the respect that you deserve, get the respect our country deserves, right? But when the House and the Senate try to get this budget passed, even though it's going to be very difficult, and when those cuts come, and that's all going to hit as close to the midterms as possible, we might start to see some actual electoral consequences, maybe. But what damage can happen between now and then, as to your point, he's trying to, to douse the flame of resistance and dismantle it by dismantling tools of democratic participation. What do we do in the meantime? Staying angry is part of it, as you note. And I tell my students when they feel helpless, and I will say it to the listeners if they're interested, is these conversations you and I are having are conversations you're having in community where you are speaking truth to lies and you are asking people to really consider what's important to them. Those conversations matter and have meaning, and those are little acts of resistance every day.
Yes, they do. And I agree with you. I think a lot of the people who voted for Trump were not very well informed or didn't give a lot of thought to, as Stephen Colbert said on The Late Show, people forgot how much they disliked him last time, and they're going to have to relearn that. And I think that a lot of the people who voted for Trump are going to be A-OK with everything he's doing until it affects them. They don't get a bill paid. They no longer get X benefit. They lose their job. They have a family member who is hurt by the lack of a program that's been canceled. When it, we see it time and time again, this idea that as long as it's theoretical pain or pain that affects those other people, those bad people, those lazy people.
Exactly.
If those people get hurt, it's fine. But, not me. I'm not one of those people. How many times have we heard it? I'm a good immigrant. Or I didn't believe it would be this bad. I believed him when he said he didn't know anything about Project 2025. I believed him when he said this. Even though we knew that in his first term in the White House, he lied more than 30,000 times to our faces. They should have known better, but I think it's going to take personal pain for people to say, oh, maybe that wasn't such a good vote. That maybe I should have voted for her.
Yeah. It's that personal pain. To your point, it's when it hits you in the most important part. The most important things in your life, the things that affect your ability to survive, right? But so I would say it is that. But the other side of this, the second side of this, I think, is that the Democrats still have not figured out as a party what their message is. And part of that is because stuff is happening so fast and being thrown at us, it's hard to keep up and have a consistent message. And so as the pain starts to be inflicted, then it's incumbent upon the Democrats to really think about not exploiting that pain and capitalizing on it in a malicious way, but to say, let's offer this alternative. Let's talk about our worldview and how that actually comports more with your worldview than you realize. And let's try to figure out a way that we all can get the things that we need and not at the expense of others. And I don't still know what exactly that message sounds like. And so
neither does anybody else, because the Democrats don't really seem to be trying to figure that out just yet. Along those lines, Suzanne, I have a question, because obviously people are not only just frustrated with Republicans, as the town halls have shown, they want their representatives, their Democratic representatives, to do more. people have been saying, why aren't we hearing from Biden? Why aren't we hearing from Obama?
Yeah.
Why aren't we hearing from Clinton? And so many people have said, well, that's old presidents generally make a practice not to criticize the current president. They've been there. They know how hard the job is. I don't think these are normal times. And I think, we've got Donald Trump today saying basically Biden is an idiot and Obama wasn't far off of that. And you begin to wonder, okay, guys, do we have to? Every day, AOC is out there and she's fighting the good fight. Young Congressman Maxwell Frost is leading people over to the Treasury building. Come on, let's see something from leadership. I'm sorry if it breaks protocol.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. The thing about Biden is that the worst thing that he can do actually is dip into the conversation, because even Democrats still don't really like him very much. Not all, but a lot, right? And so I think it's smart that he stays out of the conversation for now. And I think, President Obama has been so careful in when he gets involved. But he's still such a powerful, powerful voice in the movement, in the Democratic movement. And so for me, I'm thinking about who's currently in office that can lead this charge. And I think there's someone like Chris Murphy.
Oh, my God. He's been so amazing.
Yes.
He was really,
to me, him so much.
I didn't know much about him, but weeks and weeks and weeks ago, he was going on TV going, where are the Democrats? The House is on fire. Where are the Democrats?
Yes. And he's one of those senators we don't hear much about, to your point, because he's not the loudest. He's not the most polarized or sort of
ideologically pretty loud lately.
But that's the thing, right, is that what I've really appreciated about what he's done is he's trying to say and show that the Democrats are doing things quietly. So, for example, when the House and Senate were trying to pass their budget resolutions and the Senate was trying to pass it in the middle of the night, and House Democrats introduced 15 amendments because the Senate has no cap on that. And it forced Republicans to take positions on things they said that they believed in, and they shot all of them down. And he's been talking a lot about also, Senate Democrats, we're engaging in acts of resistance in ways that our office allows us. We are using the legislative process to block these things as much as we can. And yes, not sexy, and we don't understand the legislative process, which is fair, but there are people that are doing the good work that are trying to block some of these things from going through. And to me, as someone who studies Congress, that's way more effective than someone going out and screaming about how the House is on fire, right? You can do both of those things, of those things. Eventually, the Democrats are going to need some kind of coherent message.
Walk and chew gum at the same time, Suzanne?
How is that possible?
How is that possible? It defies physics.
How is it possible? Oh, well, if we could just show them how it works, Joan. If you could, you and I could just show them how it works.
Absolutely. Suzanne, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Tell Bill I said hello next time you run into him in the halls.
I definitely will. Thanks so much, Joan.
This has been a wonderful conversation. Political science professor Suzanne Chod from North Central College. That is going to do it for me today. That is going to do it for me this week. I am sorry that we had to go out on such a chaotic note from the White House today. We knew it was going to get worse before it got better, and we probably haven't even hit bottom yet. So that's a cheerful thought, Joan. Okay. All right. I'm going to give you all the audience. I'm going to give you homework this weekend more than any other weekend. You got to find something that brings you joy. That's your homework, because that's how we're going to get through this. We've got to find friends, family, colleagues, events, places that bring us joy. We have to retain our sanity, and we have to retain our sense of humor, difficult as that may be. I want to let you know that Patty Vasquez is going to have Sam Berloga, who's the comms director for the Indiana Democratic Party. Yes, there actually is one. And Wisconsin State Senator Dianne Hesselbein is going to be with her. An interesting discussion. Thanks for being with me this week. We are going to get through this one day at a time, one step at a time, one screaming rant at a time. Take care of yourself this weekend, okay? Have a great evening. Have a great weekend. Good night.